For today's video, I want to talk about 6 NHL players who I could see being traded next year, and when I talk about each player, I'm going to give 3 possible destinations as where they could actually be traded to. And before we get into today's video, make sure you go down and click the links in the description. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm also using Patreon a lot more, and you can become a patron at any tier and be joined in a fantasy hockey league with me this up and coming season, which will be pretty exciting. So if that is something you're interested in, the links are all down below. And without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. Starting the video off with the really obvious one, and that is Rasmus Ristolainen. You guys saw him in the thumbnail, and everybody knows that his name has been in trade talks over the past couple of weeks because he came out and said he's kind of lost his love for the game and he hasn't enjoyed playing hockey over the past couple of years, and you know, that makes sense. He's had a pretty abysmal past couple of years, puts up good offensive numbers, but I mean his all-around game and his defensive game especially has not been good whatsoever for the Buffalo Sabres, especially this past season. He had the worst plus-minus in the entire league, and no matter how good of points your defensemen put up, you at least want them to have a respectable plus-minus. And for some potential trade destinations, I have the Los Angeles Kings, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Montreal Canadiens. Starting with Montreal, they want a right-shot defenseman. There's rumors that they've been interested in Jake Gardiner now for a long time, and if they could trade off maybe one of their prospects and a draft pick or something like that to bring in a guy like Rasmus Ristolainen, who you could probably pair with a shutdown guy, maybe like Shea Weber, that would give Ristolainen some more freedom to jump up in the rush and play his offensive game while not being such a defensive liability. And I put the Red Wings because we're a team that is still trying to build up that decor, and I think it would be a good move if we got a young defenseman like Ristolainen, who is only 24, but then on Detroit it would be kind of a similar situation, as there isn't really a defenseman we could pair him with there that would open up his game and give him the freedom to jump up in the rush. And then for the last team, I have the Los Angeles Kings, and honestly this one is the most intriguing for me because they definitely could use a young defenseman like Ristolainen, and it's the same situation. You could pair him with a guy maybe like Alec Martinez or even Drew Doughty, and Drew Doughty would definitely be a good veteran for Rasmus Ristolainen to learn from. And also, I think LA could offer up a package that Buffalo would really like, maybe one involving Jonathan Quick, because then if you're the LA Kings, you could make Cal Peterson the starter, and that is another move showing that you're heading in a youthful direction, and in my opinion, that is definitely what the LA Kings should do. And then if you're Buffalo, you're getting an experienced goaltender. He's won a Stanley Cup, has had some amazing years in the NHL. Yes, sure, you can say he just had an abysmal season, but my argument to that is everybody on LA basically had a bad year with the exception of a couple guys. And yes, Quick is 33 years old, but I definitely think he probably still has at least 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 years as at least an above average starter in the NHL. I still think he can do that. And for Buffalo, I really think they need goaltending. I don't think Carter Hutton is going to cut it if they do want to make the playoffs. So honestly, I think that trade would work out for both teams. The next player we're going to touch on is the one we just left off talking about, and that is Jonathan Quick, goaltender for the LA Kings. He's 33 years old, has a cap hit of $5.8 million, and like I said, he had an abysmal season, 16, 23, and 7, a 3.38 goals against, and an 8.88 save percentage. Yes, you can put some of that blame on him, and he just really wasn't playing like himself, but I don't put it all on him because it was just an awful year for the Los Angeles Kings. And for some potential trade destinations, I have the Buffalo Sabres, who we were literally just talking about, and then I also have the New Jersey Devils. And for New Jersey's case, they have Mackenzie Blackwood and Corey Schneider right now as their most likely tandem heading into next season, and if they want to make the playoffs, I honestly don't think that is going to cut it. And they are a team, in my opinion, that is trying to win right now. They signed Wayne Simmons, they traded for PK Subban, they acquired Nikita Gusev, and then obviously drafted Jack Hughes #1 overall. All of those moves are going to help them win in this up and coming NHL season, but in my opinion, that could all be wasted if they don't get good goaltending. Corey Schneider, I don't trust him as a starter anymore whatsoever, and honestly, I wouldn't trust Mackenzie Blackwood as a starting goaltender for a playoff team either. And like I said earlier, I think Jonathan Quick can still at least be a reliable starter, especially if he is playing behind a good team, and I really do think that the New Jersey Devils have the potential to be a very good team in the Metro Division in this up and coming season. And also, I think they have some intriguing pieces that they could send the other way that LA would definitely like. Maybe a guy like Pavel Zacha, who is a former top pick, hasn't panned out at the NHL level just yet, definitely is still young and has some upside, and he could definitely use a fresh start. So I think that would be a good piece, and then be like a second and a third round pick or something along those lines, and honestly I think it could work. Moving along to the next player, and that is Carl Soderberg for the Arizona Coyotes. Now yes, I know they did just acquire him this offseason, but he only has 1 year left on his deal and he will be a UFA next summer. And if things don't go the Coyotes' way and things don't go as planned and maybe they get off to a really bad start, I think there is a strong possibility we could see Soderberg shipped out at the deadline as a rental. He just had 23 goals this past season. Can't really see him doing that again, but I definitely think 15 to 20 goals is something he can accomplish. And for some potential destinations, I have the San Jose Sharks, the New York Islanders, and the Chicago Blackhawks. For Chicago, they already have a 1-2 center, bona fide Jonathan Toews and Dylan Strome, but I think Soderberg could be a really good number 3 center for them, and same goes for the New York Islanders. Maybe they could even use him in a second line center role there, and for the San Jose Sharks, I think he would be a really good third line center as well, and again, this would most likely just be like a win now move and just a rental at the deadline, so I don't really have too much to say on Carl Soderberg, but when I was thinking about players who could potentially be traded throughout the season or even at the deadline in this up and coming year, he's a guy who definitely came to my mind because he could really benefit a contender. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if things go really well for Arizona, and Carl Soderberg plays a big part in that, so it could be a really good prediction or it could just be an awful prediction, and Arizona is a team that's trying to contend for a playoff spot, and Soderberg is a guy they would definitely keep around if they get off to a really good start and just have an overall good year. Moving along to the next player, I have Adam Henrique of the Anaheim Ducks, a 29-year-old centerman who makes $5.825 million annually, and there's a lot of term on that deal, which definitely makes it probably a tough contract to move. He had 42 points this past season. I think he's still capable of being a 50-point guy, and in my opinion, if Anaheim gets off to a slow start, they could become sellers at the deadline, and I could see a guy like Adam Henrique being shopped. For some potential destinations, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Winnipeg Jets. Now, I would really like Winnipeg if this was only a 1-year deal that Henrique was on, because then you could have another Kevin Hayes or Paul Stastny situation where they get a second line center as a rental, and I think Henry could definitely do that. But then if they brought him in on this long contract making that much money, it would put them probably in a tough situation, and you'd honestly probably just have like another similar contract to Brian Little in a couple of years. So I don't really like Winnipeg from that aspect, but they do need a second line center, so you never know. And then I have Colorado because they have a lot of money and they definitely could use some more depth scoring. But again, I don't really know if they'd be interested in a move like this because they seem to want to save a lot of that money for when they do eventually have to re-up Nathan McKinnon in the coming years. And for Columbus, maybe they're a good team next year. They definitely have a really good D-core and still have some very strong forwards there. And if they get off to a really good start, I could see them acquiring a guy like Henrique because they have the money. And honestly, they're definitely in a position where they would easily be able to take on a contract like he has. And like I said, you never know. They could be a solid team next year, especially since the Metro, in my opinion, is literally just wide open and any team has a shot. And if they think they can compete, acquiring a guy like Adam Henrique around the trade deadline would definitely help them. And for Anaheim, they probably get some picks and maybe a younger player in return, which definitely would help them for the future. Moving along now to the next player, I have Eric Staal. Yes, I know he just signed a contract extension and he probably likes it in Minnesota. $3.25 million over the next 2 years. That's definitely a movable contract, and there isn't a no trade clause or anything on the deal. And Minnesota, in my opinion, is another team who definitely could get off to a bad start and not be where they want to be and maybe become sellers at the trade deadline. And Eric Staal is definitely a guy I could see them moving. And for some potential destinations, I have the Carolina Hurricanes, the Winnipeg Jets, and the Washington Capitals. I have Carolina on there just because I think it would be really cool to see him finishing his career where it all started with the Carolina Hurricanes. And then I have the Washington Capitals strictly because maybe Kuznetsov does miss a significant amount of time if there is any repercussions for what happened. I don't really want to touch on it, but if Kuznetsov is out of the lineup for a significant amount of time, I think Washington could be in the market for a centerman, and I think a guy like Eric Staal could fill that void nicely. And honestly, the team I like the most out of this is the Winnipeg Jets because $3.25 million for the next 2 years, that is definitely something that, in my opinion, they could make work. And I think having him as a second line center in between Ehlers and Laine would definitely be an upgrade from Brian Little, and that would just help the overall depth of the team because then Brian Little would slide down to your third line center, and then you just have a much better center core. And I don't really think the price would be too high on Eric Staal because he is 34 years old, maybe just a second or third round pick and a B-level prospect, and then I think you could get a deal done there. So I really like Winnipeg, but honestly, any of these three teams, I wouldn't mind seeing Eric Staal go to. And now finishing out the video with Erik Gustafson, 27-year-old defenseman for the Chicago Blackhawks, currently a cap hit of $1.2 million, but he had 60 points as a defenseman last year, 17 goals, and if he has a year even similar to that, he's going to be in for a massive raise next summer. And honestly, I think that's a raise that Chicago might not be able to give to him because they have to sign RFA Alex DeBrincat next summer, and I think he's going to be expensive, especially considering he could score like 45 to 50 goals next year. For some potential destinations for Gustafson, I have the New Jersey Devils, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Colorado Avalanche, all teams with a lot of cap space, because when you bring him in, you're definitely going to want to sign him right away and not let him hit the unrestricted free agent market, because if he does, it'll just turn into a bidding war and there's a good chance you won't be able to keep him around. And to bring him in, you're most likely going to give up a decent package because he's still relatively young at only 27 years old, and like I said, just had an amazing season for the Chicago Blackhawks. And I honestly think Gustafson would make a beautiful addition to either of these three teams' blue lines, and honestly, all three teams have some assets that would definitely be intriguing going back the other way. For Colorado, you look at prospects like Shane Bowers, Alex Newhook. For the Philadelphia Flyers, maybe a guy like Morgan Frost. And then for the New Jersey Devils, you have a guy like Jesper Boqvist, or maybe even a guy like Pavel Zacha, who, like I said earlier in the video, could definitely benefit from a fresh start somewhere else. So for me, Erik Gustafson is definitely a player I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded. But then again, Chicago definitely probably wants to keep him around, but it's just going to be really tough to make the money work. So that is going to wrap up today's video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to go down in the comment section and let me know some players that you think could be traded in this up and coming NHL season. And with that being said, thank you guys all so much for the support on the channel lately, and thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I will see you guys all in the next video.